Vegas has died before. I need you to understand that. This city, this impossible neon fever dream rising out of the Mojave Desert, it's been pronounced dead more times than anyone can count. And every single time, it came back, stronger, bolder, more alive than before. That's the story Vegas tells itself. That's the story we all believe. Let me take you back. 1963. The mob ran everything. Every casino, every hotel, every dollar that moved through this city passed through hands that had blood on them. Then Bobby Kennedy came calling. Federal crackdowns. Investigations. The systematic dismantling of organized crime's grip on the Strip. Everyone said it was over. How could Vegas survive without the money that built it? Without the power structure that kept everything running? Without the men who knew how to make problems disappear? You know what Vegas did? It reinvented itself. Corporations moved in. Howard Hughes bought up half the Strip. The mob money got replaced by Wall Street money. Different suits. Same tables. The machine kept running. Vegas survived. 2001. September 11th. The towers fell on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, the Las Vegas Strip was empty. Not quiet. Empty. I've talked to people who were there, who worked the floors that week. They described walking through casinos that felt like mausoleums, slot machines singing to no one, dealers standing at tables with no players, the eerie silence of a city that runs on noise suddenly going mute. Air travel stopped. Tourism evaporated. The entire economic engine that powered Vegas seized up overnight. Experts said this was different. Americans would never feel safe traveling again. The age of casual leisure was over. Vegas had built itself on a fantasy of escape, and that fantasy had been murdered in real time on national television. You know what Vegas did? It pivoted. Conventions, business travel, trade shows. They transformed the city from a pure tourist destination into a corporate hub, built massive conference centers, courted industries that needed neutral ground for annual gatherings. Within 2 years, the Strip was packed again. Vegas survived. 2008. The financial crisis. This one hit different. This one hit personal. Vegas wasn't just affected by the recession. Vegas was ground zero. The housing market here collapsed harder than almost anywhere in America. Foreclosure signs sprouted like weeds in every neighborhood. Construction projects froze mid-build. Half-finished towers stood as monuments to optimism that had curdled into despair. The Fontainebleau, that cursed building we've talked about before, stopped construction at 70% complete. Just stopped. Became a skeleton haunting the north end of the Strip for over a decade. Unemployment in Clark County hit 14%. Casino revenue dropped 30% in a single year. Analysts wrote detailed reports explaining why Vegas would never recover, why the model was broken, why this city was a relic of a more prosperous era that wasn't coming back. You know what happened next? 2 years later, record revenues. Not recovery. Records. Vegas didn't just survive the financial crisis. It came back bigger than ever, grew faster than anyone predicted, proved every pessimist wrong. That's 4 times. 4 near-death experiences. 4 resurrections. It's easy to understand why people believe this city is immortal. Now, if you've been watching my videos, you know I don't do hopeful stories. I do math. I do reality. And the reality I'm about to show you is unlike anything Vegas has faced in its 60-year history as the entertainment capital of the world. So if you're not subscribed yet, this is the time, because what I'm about to explain isn't just about Vegas. It's about what happens when an entire economic model breaks. When the assumptions we've built our world on turn out to be wrong. This story matters. Hit subscribe. Let's keep going. 2020, COVID. The Strip went dark. Not metaphorically, actually dark. For the first time in history, every casino in Las Vegas closed its doors simultaneously. The lights that never went out went out. The city that never slept fell into a coma. I remember watching the footage. The empty Strip, the abandoned pools, the silence where there should have been chaos. It felt like the end of something, but you know what everyone said? Vegas will figure it out. Vegas always figures it out. Give it a year, 2 years, 3 years max. The vaccines will roll out, the restrictions will lift, the tourists will come flooding back, the money will flow, the machine will restart. That's the script, right? That's how this story is supposed to go. Because Vegas has done it before, 4 times. Survived everything, adapted to anything, found a way when there was no way. So everyone waited, everyone assumed, everyone believed the mythology, and for a minute, it looked like the mythology was right. 2022, revenge travel, pent-up demand exploding, people desperate to go somewhere, anywhere, after years of lockdowns. Vegas posted record revenue per visitor, the executives took their bonuses, the headlines wrote themselves. Vegas is back, the city that can't be killed, the survivor. But something was wrong, something nobody was talking about. Because underneath the record revenue numbers, a different story was unfolding. A story about visitor counts that weren't recovering, about occupancy rates that weren't climbing, about repeat customers who weren't coming back. The money per visitor was up, but the visitors themselves? Disappearing. And here's what nobody accounted for. What makes this crisis fundamentally different from 1963, from 2001, from 2008, from COVID itself. Every previous crisis had one thing in common. One critical thing: the customer base was still there, waiting. The middle-class Americans who loved Vegas, who dreamed about Vegas, who saved all year for their 4 days in the desert. They were still out there, still solvent, still capable of coming back when conditions improved. In '63, they were just waiting for the heat to die down. In 2001, they were just waiting to feel safe again. In 2008, they were just waiting for the economy to stabilize. In 2020, they were just waiting for the virus to pass. The demand was always there, suppressed temporarily, scared away briefly, but there, waiting, ready to return the moment the doors reopened. This time is different, and I don't say that lightly. I know every crisis feels different when you're living through it. I know the tendency to catastrophize, to assume this moment is special, unique, unprecedented, but I've spent months with the data, months talking to people inside these buildings, months trying to find the angle that proves Vegas will survive this too. And I can't find it, because the demand isn't suppressed this time. It's not scared, it's not waiting, it's destroyed. The customers who built Vegas, the middle-class families who funded every expansion, who filled every hotel room, who fed every slot machine, they're not staying home because they're nervous. They're staying home because they're broke. And you can't market your way out of that. You can't run a promotion that fixes a customer base drowning in debt. You can't launch a campaign that rebuilds a middle class that's being economically exterminated in real time. Vegas has always been able to save itself because the people who loved it were still out there, still dreaming, still capable. This time, the people are still out there, still dreaming. But the capable part, that's gone, and no amount of survival mythology can bring it back. Let me introduce you to the customer who built Las Vegas. You know him. Maybe you are him. Middle class, American, works 50 weeks a year at a job that pays enough. Not rich, not poor. Somewhere in the vast middle that used to define this country. He saves a little each month, maybe $500, maybe less. And once a year, maybe twice, he takes that money and does something crazy. He goes to Vegas, 4 nights, maybe 5. Stays at a hotel that feels fancier than anywhere he'd normally sleep. Eats at restaurants where the menu doesn't have prices because he doesn't want to know. Gambles money he can technically afford to lose. He knows the house always wins. He doesn't care. Because for 4 days, he gets to feel like someone else. Someone luckier. Someone richer. Someone who doesn't have to check his bank account before ordering dessert. That's the customer who built Vegas. Multiply him by 40 million. That's the engine that powered every casino, every hotel, every restaurant, every show on the Strip for 60 years. That customer is gone. Not hiding, not waiting, gone. Let me show you the math. In 2019, the median American household had about $8,000 in savings. $8,000. Not a fortune, but a cushion. Enough to absorb a surprise. Enough to fund a vacation without going into debt. Today, that number is under $1,000. Under $1,000. The cushion is gone. The buffer has evaporated. One unexpected car repair, one medical bill, one appliance that dies, and that savings account hits zero. Where do you think Vegas falls on the priority list when you're one emergency away from catastrophe? Credit card debt has crossed $1.2 trillion. Trillion with a T, the highest in American history. And the interest rates on those cards? Averaging over 24% now. 24%. That means the average American family is paying hundreds of dollars a month just in interest, just to service debt they've already accumulated. Money flowing out before they can even think about discretionary spending. Housing costs have exploded 40% since 2020. 40%. Rent that used to be $1,200 is now $1,700. Mortgages that used to be manageable are now suffocating. Groceries up 25%. The same cart of food that cost $200 3 years ago costs $250 now. Every single week, $50 more, $200 more a month just to eat the same things you've always eaten. And wages? Stagnant, barely moving. The average worker has gotten maybe a 10% raise since 2020. Sounds okay until you realize costs have gone up 40. That's the squeeze. That's the vice grip tightening on the American middle class. More money going out, same money coming in, the gap widening every single month. I talked to a guy named Dave. Used to come to Vegas twice a year, him and his wife. Been doing it since their honeymoon in 2004. 20 years of Vegas trips. He told me they canceled this year. Not because they don't want to come, not because Vegas did anything wrong, not because they found somewhere better. Because they can't. He said their grocery bill went up $300 a month, their mortgage adjusted and added $400 more, gas, insurance, everything. He said, we used to have about $800 a month we could do whatever with. Now we have maybe $50. There's no trip, there's no vacation, there's just trying to make it to the next paycheck. That's not one guy, that's everyone. The entire middle class is experiencing some version of Dave's story. Watching discretionary income vanish, watching options narrow, watching the life they thought they'd built become something smaller and meaner and more desperate. And here's the thing that should terrify Vegas. Even the people who could technically still afford a trip, they don't feel like they can. Financial anxiety has become the default state. I've seen the research. People with stable incomes, with actual savings, with no real reason to panic, they're behaving like they're broke anyway, because everything feels fragile. Because they've watched friends lose jobs, watched neighbors foreclose, watched the news tell them every night that disaster is one headline away. Spending money on leisure feels irresponsible now, even if you have it, even if you can afford it. The guilt stops you. The fear stops you. The constant drumbeat of economic anxiety stops you. Vegas's customer base hasn't just lost their money, they've lost their permission to spend. Now, I know what Vegas thinks the answer is. I've sat in the presentations, read the strategy documents, listen to the executives explain their vision for the future. They think wealthy tourists will fill the gap, premium pricing for premium guests. Forget the middle class, they're tapped out anyway. Let's go up market. Let's target the people who still have money, the top 10%, the international wealthy, the customers who don't flinch at a $500 room or a $1,000 dinner. Sounds logical, sounds like a plan. There's just one problem. The math doesn't work. It never did. In 2019, Vegas had 42 million visitors. The vast majority of them were middle class. The wealthy, the truly wealthy, who can spend without thinking they're maybe 5% of that number, generously. 2 million people. You can't replace 40 million middle-class visitors with 2 million wealthy ones. Even if every rich tourist spends 5 times as much, the volume isn't there. The economics collapse. It's like owning a stadium that seats 50,000 and deciding to only sell tickets to billionaires. Sure, you can charge more per seat, but you're never filling that stadium. You're never covering the costs of running it. Vegas isn't built for 2 million visitors. It's built for 40 million. The hotels, the restaurants, the casinos, the infrastructure, the staffing models, the debt payments, all of it designed for a volume that no longer exists. That's not a problem you can strategy your way out of. That's not a marketing challenge. That's an existential mismatch between what Vegas needs and what reality can provide. The middle class built Vegas, and the middle class is being economically exterminated. Not in a dramatic crash, not in a single catastrophic event, just slowly, relentlessly, one bill at a time, one squeeze at a time, until there's nothing left for Vegas, nothing left for vacations, nothing left for dreams. Every other time this city faced a crisis, the solution was simple. Wait, survive. The customers will come back, but what happens when the customers can't come back? When they're drowning in debt? When they're $400 away from disaster? When they've lost not just their money, but their permission to spend? Vegas can't fix the American economy. Vegas can't rebuild the middle class. Vegas can't solve a problem that exists far beyond its borders, which means Vegas can't fix itself. But that's only the first trap, the one from the outside, the one bearing down on the city. The second trap, the one that makes escape truly impossible. That one's already inside the building. There's an obvious solution to everything I've just described. So obvious, it's almost insulting. If prices drove the customers away, lower the prices. If resort fees and parking charges and $50 buffets killed the golden goose, then bring back the $39 rooms, the $5 blackjack tables, the free parking that existed for 50 years. Make Vegas affordable again. Make it the middle-class paradise it used to be. The customers aren't dead, they're just broke, so meet them where they are. Drop the rates, fill the rooms, rebuild the volume that made this city work. It's so simple, so logical, and so completely impossible, because Vegas isn't trapped by pride. It's not trapped by stubbornness. It's not even trapped by greed anymore. Vegas is trapped by math, by debt, by financial obligations that were locked in during a world that no longer exists. Let me show you the cage. Caesars Entertainment, the company behind Caesar's Palace, the Forum Shops, Harrah's, half the iconic names on the Strip and beyond. $12 billion in debt. $12 billion. I've said that number before, but I need you to really feel it this time. $12 billion is more than the entire annual budget of some states. More than the GDP of countries you've actually heard of. A number so large it stops meaning anything. And that's just one company, MGM Resorts. The Bellagio, the Area, the MGM Grand, the Luxor, Mandalay Bay, New York, New York, a portfolio of properties that defined what a mega resort could be. Over $30 billion in total liabilities. Not all traditional debt, some of it hidden in sale-leaseback arrangements, in financial structures designed to look cleaner on paper, but it all functions the same way. Money owed, payments due, whether the customers show up or not. Wynn Resorts, $8 billion. The entire Las Vegas casino industry is sitting on combined debt exceeding $60 billion. $60 billion, all of it structured during the boom years. All of it built on assumptions that no longer hold. All of it requiring payments that don't care if the Strip is packed or empty. Here's how this works. When you take on debt, you don't just owe the principal, you owe interest. And the interest on $60 billion? It's staggering. Caesars alone pays over $1 billion a year just in interest payments, not paying down what they owe, just the cost of owing it. $1 billion a year flowing out of the company before a single worker gets paid, before a single improvement gets made, before a single dime goes toward the guest experience. $1 billion just to service the privilege of being in debt every single year. Now do the math. What happens if Caesars lowers room rates? Let's say they drop prices 20% across the board. Roll back to something approaching the old days. Make Vegas feel accessible again. Revenue drops. Not proportionally to the price cut, there'd be some volume increase, but it drops significantly. Maybe 15% when everything shakes out. 15% less revenue, but the debt doesn't drop. The interest payments don't care about your pricing strategy. $1 billion is still due every year on schedule or else. So now you're trying to cover the same fixed costs, the same debt service. With 15% less money coming in, you can't. The payment gets missed. And when the payment gets missed, you default. And when you default, the bondholders take control. The bank seize assets. Restructuring begins. And restructuring is a polite word for strip it down and sell it off. That's what happens if they lower prices. Death. Faster? Okay. So what if they keep prices high? What we're seeing right now, the customers keep leaving. The visitors who do come spend less, stay shorter, never return. Revenue drops anyway, just slower, but it still drops. And eventually you still can't make the payment, and you still default, and the banks still take everything. Same destination, different timeline. Do you see the trap now? There is no door that leads to survival. Lower prices, die fast. Keep prices high, die slow. Either way you die. The debt was designed for a different world. A world with 42 million visitors. A world with a thriving middle class. A world where the good times would keep rolling forever. That world is gone. But the debt doesn't care. The debt just sits there, patient, relentless, waiting for its payment. And if the payment doesn't come, the debt takes what it's owed. I talked to a financial analyst who covers gaming. She's been watching these companies for 15 years. She explained it to me like this. She said, imagine you bought a house at the peak of the market, huge mortgage, but you had a great job, so the payments were fine. Then you lost that job. Now you're making half what you used to. The mortgage doesn't adjust. The bank doesn't care about your situation. You either make the payment or you lose the house. That's Vegas right now. The income collapsed. The debt didn't. And there's no job coming that fixes the gap. No job coming. That's the phrase that's stuck. Because Vegas can't create 40 million middle-class tourists out of thin air. Can't rebuild the customer base that's drowning in their own debt. Can't snap its fingers and restore the economic conditions that made those debt loads manageable. The income collapsed. The debt didn't. That's the cage. Now, I know what you're thinking. Because it's what everyone thinks when they hear about a crisis this big. Someone will step in, right? That's how it works. 2008. The banks were failing, too big to fail, and the government stepped in, wrote checks, backstopped the system, kept everything from collapsing. The auto industry, same thing, bailouts, emergency loans, the cavalry arriving just in time. When things get bad enough, someone always comes to save the day. A billionaire looking for a deal. A foreign investor seeking a foothold. The federal government deciding this is too important to let fail. That's the final hope. That's the last card in the deck. Vegas doesn't need to save itself. It just needs to survive long enough for someone else to save it. Hold on until the rescue arrives. The white knight, the bailout, the deep pockets that can absorb the losses and wait out the storm. I spent months looking into this. Months asking the question, who saves Las Vegas? And what I found should terrify anyone still holding out hope. Let's start with the obvious. The federal government. When the banks collapsed in 2008, Washington wrote checks. Hundreds of billions of dollars, whatever it took to keep the system from imploding. When the auto industry cratered, same thing. Emergency loans, structured bailouts. The government decided that some things were too important to let fail. When COVID hit, trillions flowed to businesses, to individuals, to anyone and anything that might keep the economy breathing. That's the playbook. Crisis hits, government steps in, problem solved. So why not Vegas? I'll tell you why not. Imagine you're a senator. Imagine you're up for re-election in 18 months. Now imagine the attack ad. Your opponent's face filling the screen. Serious voice. Ominous music. Senator Johnson voted to bail out Las Vegas casinos. While working families struggled to pay rent, Johnson gave billions of your tax dollars to gambling corporations, to slot machines, to companies that prey on addiction. Senator Johnson, wrong priorities, wrong for America. That ad writes itself. That ad runs in every swing district in the country. That ad ends careers. There is zero political appetite for casino bailouts. Zero. It doesn't matter which party controls what. It doesn't matter how many jobs are at stake. It doesn't matter how logical the economic argument might be. The optics are poison. Gambling companies, while families suffer, while teachers buy their own supplies and bridges crumble and veterans sleep on the streets, no politician survives that vote. So cross the federal government off your list. They're not coming. Okay, what about foreign money? That saved American industries before. Japanese investors bought Rockefeller Center in the 80s. Chinese money flooded into Hollywood. Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds have stakes in everything from tech companies to farmland. Surely someone out there has deep enough pockets and long enough time horizons to see Vegas as an opportunity. A few years ago, that might have been true. Not anymore. Let's start with China. For 2 decades, Chinese investment poured into American assets. Real estate, entertainment, gaming, especially Macau was the laboratory. Vegas was the prize. That pipeline has slowed to a trickle. Macau itself is in crisis. The Chinese government cracked down hard on gambling. Revenue collapsed. The companies that were supposed to be flush with cash are now fighting for survival in their own backyard. Beyond that, geopolitical tensions have made Chinese investment in American gaming politically complicated. Regulatory scrutiny, national security concerns, headlines that no company wants. The Chinese cavalry isn't coming. What about the Middle East? The Saudis, The Emiratis. The sovereign wealth funds with literally trillions in assets. They're building their own Vegas now. Have you seen what's happening in the Gulf? Massive entertainment complexes rising from the desert. Saudi Arabia just announced a gaming license framework. They're not looking to buy American casinos. They're looking to compete with them. Why save Vegas when you can build a newer, shinier version on your own soil? Cross sovereign wealth off the list. Private equity then. The smart money. The sophisticated investors who see opportunity in crisis. The vultures who circle dying companies and swoop in to feast. Here's the problem. They're already here. Private equity isn't the potential savior of Las Vegas. Private equity is why Las Vegas is dying. Remember how we talked about that $60 billion in debt? Where do you think it came from? Private equity firms perfected a strategy called the leveraged buyout. Buy a company using borrowed money, load the debt onto the company itself, extract fees, extract dividends, extract everything that isn't nailed down. If the company survives, you make a fortune. If it collapses, you've already taken your cut. Caesars, the poster child. Bought by Apollo and TPG in 2008, loaded with debt, pushed into bankruptcy, restructured, still drowning. The private equity firms aren't coming to save Vegas. They're positioning to pick through the wreckage when it collapses. They're not rescuers. They're undertakers, waiting patiently for the body to stop moving so they can strip it for parts. That leaves individual billionaires. The Musks and Bezoses of the world. Couldn't one of them just decide Vegas is worth saving? Write a check, take a loss for a few years, wait for the turnaround. In theory, yes. In practice, think about it from their perspective. You're a billionaire. You have essentially infinite options for where to put your money. Tech, space, biotech, real estate in a dozen countries, emerging markets, crypto, AI, anything you want. Now someone puts the Vegas opportunity on your desk. $60 billion in industry debt, customer base evaporating, revenue declining, regulatory complexity, union obligations, a business model built for a middle class that's being systematically destroyed. And by the way, the whole sector might collapse in the next 2 years. You'd have to be insane. Why catch a falling knife when you could invest in something with actual upside? Billionaires don't get rich by making stupid bets. And right now, Vegas looks like a very stupid bet. I talked to an analyst. Gaming industry, 15 years covering these companies, knows where every body is buried. Off the record, I asked her directly, who saves Vegas? She laughed. Not a happy laugh. The kind of laugh that escapes when someone asks a question so naive it catches you off guard. She said, everyone's waiting for someone else to go first. The companies are waiting for a government bailout that's never coming. The government is waiting for private investment that makes political cover possible. The investors are waiting for prices to fall further before they even consider stepping in. Everyone's waiting. No one's moving. I pushed her, but eventually someone has to do something, right? She shook her head. You're thinking about this wrong. In most crises, there's a bottom, a point where things are cheap enough that the opportunity outweighs the risk. But Vegas doesn't have a bottom right now. It has a black hole. The debt, the declining customer base, the structural problems. There's no price low enough to make this attractive until those fundamentals change. And nothing is going to change them. Nothing is going to change them. That landed hard. She finished with something I haven't stopped thinking about. She said, no one's coming. That's not pessimism, that's just math. Everyone who could save Vegas has done the same calculations. And the calculations say, let it fall. Buy the pieces after, that's the play. Let it collapse, then move in. Let it collapse. That's the strategy, not from one investor, from all of them. The consensus position on Las Vegas is to let it fail, to wait out the destruction, to circle like vultures until there's something worth picking over. No one's coming. And the people who will pay for that consensus? They're not the executives. The C-suite will be fine. Golden parachutes already packed. Consulting gigs already lined up. Board seats waiting at other companies in other industries. When the music stops, they'll float gently to the ground. Soft landing, new opportunity. Life goes on. But the workers? 300,000 people in Clark County whose lives depend on the casino industry. The dealers, the housekeepers, the bartenders, the servers, the valets, the security guards, the maintenance crews, they don't have parachutes. They have mortgages. They have kids in school. They have roots in a city that's about to discover what happens when the luck runs out. No government bailout, no foreign rescue, no private equity savior, no billionaire on a white horse. Just 300,000 people watching the walls close in, waiting for a rescue that isn't coming, and trying to figure out what happens when a city built on luck finally runs out of it. So what happens now? I've shown you the broken customer. I've shown you the debt cage. I've shown you the empty room where the rescue was supposed to be. Now let me show you what comes next. Because this isn't theoretical anymore. This isn't some distant possibility. The clock is already ticking. I've talked to analysts, bankruptcy attorneys, industry insiders who watch the numbers that don't make it into press releases. They all say the same thing. 18 to 36 months. That's the window. 18 to 36 months before the first major strip property files for bankruptcy. Could be sooner. The pressure is accelerating. Every month with declining visitors, every quarter with missed projections, every earnings call with increasingly creative language trying to hide how bad things have gotten. The runway is shortening, and when the first one falls, that's when it gets ugly. Let me explain how dominoes work in an interconnected economy. A major strip casino doesn't exist in isolation. It's connected to hundreds of vendors, thousands of employees, tens of thousands of indirect jobs. The company that supplies linens to Caesars also supplies 3 other major properties. The food distributor that stocks the restaurants at one casino stocks a dozen more. The staffing agencies, the entertainment bookers, the maintenance contractors, the technology providers, all of them have exposure to multiple properties. All of them are counting on payments from companies that are counting on revenue that isn't coming. When the first casino files for bankruptcy, those vendors don't get paid. And vendors who don't get paid can't pay their own bills, can't make payroll, can't fulfill contracts with other clients. The linen company that loses its biggest account suddenly can't deliver to anyone. The food distributor that takes a 7-figure loss starts cutting corners everywhere. The staffing agency that loses half its placements floods the market with desperate workers willing to take anything. That's called contagion, and it spreads fast. The second weakest casino sees its vendor relationships destabilize. Credit terms tighten. Insurance costs spike. The cushion that was keeping them barely alive suddenly disappears. And they tip, then the third, then the fourth. 2008 showed us how this works. One bank fails, exposes another bank's bad bets, triggers a run on a third, freezes credit markets, collapses businesses that had nothing to do with the original failure. We watched it happen in real time. We swore we learned from it. We didn't, because here we are again. Same mechanics, different industry, same ending. But the cascade doesn't stop at the Strip. It can't, because Las Vegas isn't just casinos. It's a city. 300,000 people live in Clark County because of the gaming industry. Not just workers, families, communities. An entire civilization built on the assumption that the money would keep flowing. And that money doesn't just pay salaries, it pays taxes. Gaming taxes fund everything. Schools, roads, police departments, fire stations, public hospitals, social services. The entire infrastructure that allows a city to function depends on revenue from an industry that's collapsing. The state of Nevada collects nearly $1 billion a year in gaming taxes alone. $1 billion. What happens to the schools when that billion becomes 500 million? What happens to the roads when the maintenance budgets get cut in half? What happens to the police force when the city can't afford to pay them? What happens to the fire department when the stations start closing? I'll tell you what happens. What happened to Detroit? What happened to Gary, Indiana? What happened to every American city that built itself around a single industry and then watched that industry die? Services collapse. Crime increases. Property values crater. The people who can leave, leave. And the people who can't, they're trapped in a city that can no longer take care of them. The exodus has already started. For the first time in decades, more people are leaving Las Vegas than arriving. Not tourists, residents. The workers who built this city, who dealt cards for 20 years, who made beds and mixed drinks and parked cars and smiled at every guest. They're packing up, moving to Phoenix, moving to Texas, moving anywhere that isn't here, taking their skills with them, taking their families with them, taking whatever's left of the dream. And what stays behind? I'll tell you what stays behind. For sale signs spreading like a plague through neighborhoods. Foreclosure notices taped to doors. Schools losing students faster than they can adjust budgets. Businesses closing. Strip malls going dark. The infrastructure of a functioning community slowly unwinding. And on the Strip itself, the lights will stay on. For a while, because that's what Vegas does. It performs. Even when there's no one left to perform for. But look closer. One casino goes dark. Then another. Then a third. The iconic names. The towers that defined a skyline. The buildings that promised a fantasy of wealth and luck and possibility. Dark. Empty. Monuments to an era that couldn't sustain itself. The entertainment capital of the world becoming a museum of its own failure. I want to take you somewhere. One last time. The Strip at night. Stand with me on the pedestrian bridge, the one that crosses Las Vegas Boulevard, the one where tourists used to gather 10 deep to take photos. Look down. The lights are still blazing. The fountains still dance. The screens still flash their advertisements for shows and restaurants and experiences. The machines are still singing. Somewhere in those buildings, dealers are still shuffling cards. Servers are still carrying drinks. Housekeepers are still making beds. The performance continues. But now you see it differently. Now you know what you're looking at. Not a city, a patient. On life support, the vital signs failing. The doctors stepping out of the room. The family gathering to say goodbye. Vegas survived the mob. Survived 9/11. Survived the financial crisis. Survived COVID. Every single time it adapted. Every single time it found a way. Every single time the customer base was still there, waiting, ready to return. This time the customers are gone, broken by an economy that ground them into dust. This time the debt is crushing. $60 billion that doesn't care about circumstances. This time no one's coming. Not the government, not foreign money, not private equity, not billionaires. No one. This isn't a crisis Vegas can adapt its way out of. There's no pivot, no reinvention, no clever strategy that makes the math work. The math doesn't work. It can't work. The equation is broken at every level. For 60 years, Vegas told us the house always wins. We believed it, watched it survive everything, assumed it would survive this too. But the house only wins when people show up to play. And the players are gone. The money is gone. The rescue isn't coming. Vegas is out of moves. And for the first time in its history, this city is going to learn what every gambler eventually learns. Sometimes the cards just don't come. You can play perfectly, make all the right decisions, do everything you're supposed to do, and still lose. Because the deck was stacked before you sat down. Because the game was rigged from the start. Because luck isn't a strategy. It's a loan, and eventually, the loan comes due. Vegas borrowed against its luck for 60 years. Built an empire on the assumption that the cards would keep falling its way. They're not falling anymore, and there's nothing left to do. Nothing left to try. Just watch the chips run out, one stack at a time, until the table is empty. And the dealer finally goes home.